Jörg Hofmann, Germany's leading iGaming lawyer and head of the gaming and betting law practice group at Melchers law firm. Jörg, thank you very much for being here, and please make your way to the stage. Over to you.
Thanks for your kind introduction, Willem. Yeah, well, welcome to Gaming in Germany, or welcome back to Gaming in Germany in Berlin. It's been one year since we met last time here, and in between, there was lots of progress. We can see a development, the regulatory world. A year ago, we were discussing pending license applications. This is something we still do, but now first licenses, as Willem said, were granted. And as ever, we can see a certain structure that follows every regulation when it's going to be matured. First, there is legislation. Then, based on that legislation, a licensing regime, a license application proceeding taking place until first licenses or even last licenses were granted. And then the focus is changing. We're not discussing how to deliver these licensing documents as an operator. We're now discussing, together with the regulator or in this whole environment, how does it work? How does the system work? And some new topics come up, one of which is enforcement. Whereas in the past in Germany, enforcement activity were initiated against the whole industry because there wasn't any license industry in online gaming in Germany. It's now against the black market in order to protect the licensed market. That is very necessary, and the industry is hoping that it's not only necessary, but also successful. So we can see this is a common topic all across Europe and all across the globe. We're doing some regulatory update on a global and European basis within a second, just a few snapshots. We're starting with what is currently discussed in Europe, and it's one point is enforcement, the other item is advertising, in particular advertising restrictions. And there's a combination of development of legislation, of regulation, and of restrictions. Talking about restrictions, we see, if we look at enforcement activities, huge fines coming up across various states in Europe, various jurisdictions, amounts which we're not used to. That is something where we can say the train may have less station, something we can look at. And I will give you some examples right now. The highest fines I've been aware of is 70 million British pounds. That equals roughly 17 million euros in the UK. That's been imposed by the UK Commission in August this year against Entain due to some infringements against AML and safer gambling regulation. Not recently. It was before 2020, but it's old stuff. And the investigation started in 2020, and 2 years later, it pops up. In Norway, also recently in September, so a few days ago, the government and the regulator announced fines being imposed of 100,000 British pounds per day based on a cease and desist letter against one operator, telling him, if you're not willing to definitely leave the country, this is what you can expect, 100,000 British pounds, which is 113,000 euros per day, where you do not comply with regulation. The Netherlands also started to consider high fines. So on the periodic penalties being imposed, or at least being threatened to operators who do not comply with regulation, meaning who do not offer their offerings to customers in the Netherlands without a license. I mean, definitely we have the head regulator here, Mr. René Janssens, who will, I'm sure he will leave some words on this because it's very interesting and see how this is all going to be working. What we also can realize is that regulators across Europe regularly put their heads together frequently and, of course, share their experiences, their knowledges, and what is next in terms of enforcement means what can be successful, what cannot be successful. And there will be frequent meetings where we can expect European regulators sharing new ideas for restrictions, for enforcement and developing something. And what we can assume is that this is not just focused on one jurisdiction each. This is a European development. Starting with advertising, when Italy imposed the first total advertising ban for gaming, for online gaming a few years ago, that was a discussion not only in Italy, here and there from time to time you see this topic popping up in other European, not only European jurisdictions. Although it is a very critical aspect not to allow any sort of advertising for gaming, because at least you need to inform people that this is legalized, licensed gambling, to stay away from black market operators. There is still a discussion, and it is a discussion that is refreshed at the moment. We can see that in Spain and in Belgium, these topics is quite new, again, on the agenda. We can see that Denmark trying at least to amend its regulation in order to ban gambling ads from TV broadcasting 15 minutes before and after some match presentations on TV. We've got that sort of watershed in Germany even longer, in a certain different way. The island parliament, the Irish parliament, is discussing restrictions. But to me, it's always interesting to see what the UK does. The UK is a society that is very much used to gambling. They have a strong tradition. And if you walk across the streets of London or somewhere else, you see betting shops, you see many offerings, many contact to the gaming world all around you. They were the first who introduced a really comprehensive gambling act in 2005, then applied it as of 2007. It's under complete review again, but the UK Commission says we'll not want to prohibit advertising for gambling. We see it's necessary, but we guarantee huge fines and youth enforcement against every breach against responsible gaming marketing guidelines. That's the other approach, trying to mindfully reorganize regulation, but make it possible. I won't judge what is best, prohibition, I don't think it is, or a regulation that allows a channelization of traffic to the offerings which we are going to support. I think that is very important that we keep that in mind. In Germany, the times have changed. We are no longer a black or a gray market only. We are, at least in the near future, a white market, and then there is a black market outside. And how we handle this, that will be the challenge for us. We've seen how other states across the European Union and elsewhere handle this. And elsewhere is outside of the European Union. Third countries, not third world countries. There are some which are part of the black market, but for instance, Asia, the US, and those sort of countries. And I'm very happy to introduce to you the president of IMGL, which stands for the International Masters of Gaming Law. It's the preeminent association of really qualified gaming legal experts across the world. Marc Ellinger will give a few words on the association. I guess, Marc, if you come and join me here. He's from the United States, served as president of IMGL for almost 3 years now, did a wonderful job, just hosted the IMGL conference in London last week very successfully. And Marc will tell us a little bit about what's going on in these jurisdictions, in these parts of the world, before I come back for a few minutes and focus on Germany and on where we are currently staying with our regulatory development. Marc, here's the floor.
Thank you, Jörg. Thank you very much, Jörg. Thank you, Willem, for inviting me to come over. It's a pleasure to be here. I speak a little bit of German, but I'm not even going to try because it would be hard on your ears and tough on my mind, so I will stick to English. A few words about the International Masters of Gaming Law very briefly before I jump into what's going on around the world. The International Masters of Gaming Law, by its name, is truly an international organization. We have members that are only admitted by invitation only and go through a vetting process all around the world, more than 50 countries, more than 100 jurisdictions when you look at sub-jurisdictions inside the countries. We focus on education. We focus on developing good models of regulation to allow the gaming industry to grow in a responsible and appropriate manner. And it's kind of a pleasure to be in that role as we have come out of COVID. Jörg mentioned I became president in January of 2020. Needless to say, I thought I was having a very auspicious start, and suddenly the world changed dramatically overnight. We find ourselves on the other side of the pandemic, and it's exciting to watch so many of the developments that have occurred. In the United States, pre-COVID, predominantly was a land-based jurisdiction, as were several other jurisdictions around the world, and COVID obviously had a huge impact on land-based. That's coming back. What's exciting is the explosion in growth in iGaming and sports betting across the globe. A few words about things that are going on around the globe, and then I'd like to spend a little more time talking about the United States, which is very exciting. We see Asia opening up. Southeast Asia particularly has a number of places that are opening up. We see India as a real opportunity for growth and development in the future. Japan, which is major developments opening up. They have passed legislation to actually go to full-size land-based casinos, and some of the regulatory issues, we think there's an opportunity to see iGaming develop very quickly over there also. Africa continues to grow, particularly in the mobile arena. Their cell phones, mobile phones are very much, I guess we have technical difficulties, I'm advised. So Africa continues to grow in the fact that they're very, very much a mobile phone-driven environment, and we're seeing gaming grow down there. One of the more exciting developments is going on in Dubai, which is, frankly, as an American, somewhat surprising. I never expected the Middle East to ever open up. So that's a really exciting development, and one that I know a lot of folks are following very closely, particularly folks out of Israel that have a lot of involvement in that since the Abraham Accords, and we're hopeful to watch the Middle East open up. Latin America, South America is really an exciting area. It's growing very fast. Its population is growing. Its economy is growing very much. Brazil is the largest country in South America, is opening up a little slower perhaps than we had hoped, and that's one of the topics I do want to address as we go forward. But we are seeing it open. Of jurisdictions in South America are growing very quickly. There are a lot of opportunities in that part of the world, in the Spanish-speaking world. Turning to North America, I mean, there are really two separate jurisdictions there, Canada and the United States, and they're very different. Ontario, for my next act, I'll start juggling. Ontario is opening up. I think that's really exciting to see iGaming come on board in Ontario. It's the largest province in Canada. It contains the bulk of their population. It's very much an opportunity. It had been, with respect to iGaming, maybe at best a gray market. Some might have called it a black market. It's opening up, and I think that's a really exciting development. But what's really exciting as an American, and I think as someone who has an international practice and an international flair, is the United States is opening up very rapidly. It's kind of shocking how quickly things have developed over there. It's really only a few years ago that sports betting was fundamentally allowed in one state, Nevada, Las Vegas, in a very, very small amount in a few other states. Since the United States Supreme Court opened up sports betting, we've seen literally in the space of 4 years, sports betting in the United States go from one state to a couple of states. Now we have more than 20 states that have legalized sports betting. In the next year, we will see several more open up, and in the immediate years thereon, a number of states will open up. There are 50 states in the United States. There are 48 states that have some form of gaming, including lottery. Look at the bulk of those states to eventually open up into sports betting. It's very popular in the United States, and it continues to move forward. What's even more remarkable is what's happened with iGaming
in the United States. iGaming didn't exist in the United States 5-6 years ago. New Jersey opened up iGaming, and it was only inside their facilities. It was not well utilized, and it was really a small niche market, unlike all the developments, particularly that were going on in Europe as iGaming exploded. Now we have over 12 jurisdictions that have passed and implemented one form or another of iGaming. There are a number of them that are coming online this year with their regulatory schemes. And we're going to see more and more iGaming across the United States. It really is the wave of the future, and it's a great opportunity to get in early because it's still very much the ground floor. There are lots of opportunities. The licensing regimes in the various states run the gamut of being very strict to being really quite open and available. So I would encourage folks to take a look at that. The other thing that happens in the United States that seems to be somewhat different than my experience in many other countries is the very quick movement that goes from passing of legislation to legalize, whether it's sports betting or iGaming, to the actual implementation. Often the legislation contains incredibly short timelines. For example, in some states, 6 months from passage of legislation to the market being required to be opened. One state in the United States has a 90-day window. Their legislation goes into effect, and in 90 days, they have to be up and running as a matter of law. And the only way you can do that is not to overregulate. Let's be honest, mistakes will get made. But you can't be afraid of making mistakes. You have to be willing to adjust to them. Speed is what's really important. You have to take into account responsible gaming. That's a big issue in the United States. You have to take into account competition issues. We call them antitrust in the United States are big issues and can lead to divestment, which has become a very big issue, particularly in the land-based industry, and looks to be an issue as we go forward into iGaming growth. Illegal gaming is the biggest problem in the United States. And the solution to the elimination of illegal gaming is to legalize gaming, to lightly regulate it as opposed to over-regulate it, and take the bad actors out of the market so that the folks that are professionals and who are willing to go through the probity process and the due diligence can become the operators and foreclose the black market that continues to exist in so many places, particularly in the United States. I know my time, I was given 10 minutes. It seems like I've talked for 2 and it's 9. I would like to summarize by saying that the world of gaming is moving very quickly. It's important not to slow down, and you have to move quickly. You have to work together with the regulators, and you have to have a good message. Public opinion is really important and drives many of the policies that tend to harm the growth and expansion of gaming. So working with regulators, being responsible, and getting those messages out will really help allow the industry to grow. And growth of the industry is frankly good for everyone. My last name's Ellinger. My ancestral family home is in Bavaria, so I'm particularly excited to see Germany open up. I'm really excited to be here. I love coming to Berlin. It's a beautiful city. Thank you all for listening to me. I wish you all the best of luck and great success. Thank you. And now I'd like to turn the microphone back over to Jörg Hofmann. Jörg was one of my mentors in the IMGL, so it's a pleasure to turn the mic over to him to talk a little bit about the regulation in Germany. Jörg?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. I hope my microphone works. Again, thanks for sharing some insights with us from all over the world. But where are we now in Germany? I mean, those of you who are sitting in this room, you might probably all know. Basically, we are talking about various licensing application proceedings, about the granting of licenses, and this is virtual slot machines, online poker, and sports betting. Sports betting these days is something we are familiar with. The whitelist says at the moment, it says today, 34 licenses were granted. but they all need to be renewed by the end of this year, because they expire by the end of 6 years. Virtual slot machine licenses, so far, 9 have been granted. There's more to come. And I think this will hopefully be by the end of the year, if not earlier. And we have 2 different regulators. For sports betting, it's the Regional Council in Darmstadt, starting to proceed applications as of 1st of January 2020. First licenses were granted in October that year. And the State Administrative Office, das Landesverwaltungsamt in Halle, in Saxony-Anhalt, they took over as responsibility and started the application proceeding 1st July 2021. And sometimes people from abroad do not understand why does it take so long. Well, it takes so long because this is an authority that started from scratch. They all need to familiarize themselves with regulation, with these requirements they need to apply. And I can tell from experience, it was kind of frustration during the first weeks in July and August 21, trying to get a responsive civil servant or case handler, because they all had to learn and to study and to mature themselves. Thankfully, and I think this is important to mention, this has all been changed. Today, this authority is working very hard, and talking about responsiveness, from my experience, it's turned to be excellent. It depends from case center to case center, but I think they promise, or at least they aim to get this done within the next couple of weeks, and I guess they will do. But there's something else, and that is the gambling committee. We call this in German das Glücksspielkollegium. That is something which is unique. It's a group of regulators, each regulator representing one German state, so it is 16 regulators, and they have the final saying on every important decision to make. In every other jurisdiction on this world, the gambling regulator makes decisions. In Germany, not yet, not in 2022. He always has to ask the gambling committee. And this committee needs to find a majority vote, 3/3, and that is sometimes impossible. Why? Because we have different attitudes in different German states. Some are reluctant, some are conservative or against regulation, and they didn't want to sign the interstate treaty, which is the basis for our regulation. Well, they signed it once this treaty was a compromise, so down in its quality to achieve the legal and the regulatory goals, that because we're as close to side of interdiction and restriction, we can sign it. And this cultural discussion still is pending at the moment. So we only have these 9 virtual slot machine licenses. There's more to come. 0 online poker, I know. There are some applications being successfully done. So hopefully in the near future, we will have more to report on this. Let me show you, or let me introduce you to those issues which are the major challenges to the regulators, politicians, and of course to the operators. There are a few points. And insofar, I would say that matches pretty nice to what we've said before, because this is typical for every jurisdiction, maybe in Europe or somewhere else. First of all, the duration of licensing regime, licensing applications. The question is, when is it finished? This question not only applies for virtual slots that I mentioned, but also what happens to the sports betting license. I said they will all expire by the end of this year, meaning if they will not be renewed on time as of 1st of January next year, there is no license, no legal operation possible in the sector of sports betting. So the challenge is for the regulatory bodies at the time, the regional council, and the gaming committee to make sure there is no gap between December and January. Second question is, what happens if that is not possible for some reason? If the authority cannot handle all the application and bring them to an end before the year is over? That is, to me, the most urgent question where we need legal certainty. Otherwise, we can only get legal certainties by way of litigation. And I hate to say that, there's so many pending litigation in Germany, which I don't think is not necessary, or were not necessary. One can handle these things differently. I think the industry doesn't like to go to court unless it's the only option they have. So hopefully this will not be an issue when Christmas is coming. And then, of course, the question is, what will be written in these licenses? Will they be the same? It's the same law. What about deposit limits? It's a big discussion. Standard deposit limit in Germany is 1,000 euro. For sports betting licenses, an exemption was possible in the amount of, in the tiers, up to 10,000, up to 30,000. I think it would be a good idea simply to take this and apply it to the new licenses, but we don't know. Just in case this decision will not have been made, and just in case in January it would be 1,000 euro, I think that would kill the industry. So the regulators hopefully are aware that this is extremely urgent to get this fixed as well. We have some regulators here, and I'm so happy that we have them here when we can discuss things, because what Marc Ellinger said, key to successful regulation and to successful market appearance and channeling is the dialogue between regulators and the industry on a basis of trust and transparency. Very important. There's a discussion about the permissible bet types. Months ago, I can't remember, maybe in March or so, the Regional Council published a list of permissible bet types, which reduced the amount of offered bet types up to 30%. Sorry, up to 70% and down to 30%. And the discussion whether this could be justified or not, of course it can't be justified, but the discussion is a heavy one because the decision has been made by the Gambling Committee. It's not the authority. It's the Gambling Committee who made the decision which bet types should be permitted and which not. And it's a real challenge. So I think if there is no dialogue that ends up with a settlement which is acceptable for the whole industry, it will be a court to make a final decision. And that's not always the best because the judges try to do their best, but they're not experts on anything. So I think, and I encourage any sort of dialogue between the trade associations, there's 3 of them at least, between the industry, the stakeholders, and of course the regulators. It should be possible. Next year it's different. There will be no gambling committee, and the GGL, the third regulator, the super regulator, die gemeinsame Glücksspielbehörde der Länder, the Joint Gambling Supervisory Authority, will take over responsibility for everything. License application proceedings, supervision of the industry, assessing the development, research, and of course, enforcement. Enforcement, something they're already responsible for. As of 1st of July, that was the first and only responsibility that was taken over by the GGL this year. Everything else, then next year, 1st of January. It's a big challenge, because if it doesn't work, then the problem for the protected, for the then not so much protected legal market in Germany remains an issue, of course. There are other discussions concerning LUGAS, which is the safe server system. Not only safe server system, it's also the limit server for deposit limits, and to avoid parallel playing. That is at the moment, and not only at the moment, forever handled by the State Administrative Office in Halle. And it was a challenge for everyone. And I can remember first discussions we had with Mr. Schleifer, who is hopefully here, but if he's not, he will be here. He is one of the top experts. If any questions related to LUGAS needs to be an answer, and he's one of these people I really adore because they are so responsive on a day-to-day basis. I think we will get a lot of intelligence on LUGAS, because that's a challenge, and could also be a legal challenge because there are data protection issues discussed among the industry and the regulators. Hope we get some more intelligence on this. Touch briefly on taxes. Of course, they are too high. Every operator would say the tax is too high, but here 5%, 5.3% nominative tax on stakes in an online casino product, which we cannot name online, it's virtual slots. That makes us not competitive. So probably that is another sector where we need to have an eye on. And finally, the enforcement. Enforcement against the black market. I think if that doesn't work, then the black market can celebrate. As Mark said before, you need not to over-regulate, you need to regulate an environment where the player feels himself home and is going to play. That means the offering should match his demand. Of course, balanced. We have a social responsibility as a whole industry and make sure that we treat our players well, supervise them, and not these things, they lead to these imposed fines in the UK where exactly this social responsibility was not met. We will have the pleasure to listen to Mrs. Nadia Wieczajewski later. She's going to deliver a speech because she is the head of the enforcement department with the GGL, and she has a lot of insight. And she has also a long-standing practice from Rhineland-Palatinate, knowing how it works or how it doesn't work. And so those questions, those figures, those facts we expect will hopefully be delivered shortly in this room. With that, I thank you for your attention. I'm going to wish you an excellent and fruitful conference, hopefully with a lot of new insights and good discussions. Thanks for your attention again. See you all on the floor.
Jörg. Thank you very much. Also thanks, Marc Ellinger, for this excellent overview you just shared with us. But please don't leave, Jörg, because we gave you the opportunity to ask questions in Slido, so you can use the Slido app with the QR code that's on your badge, or you can go to slido.com and use the event hashtag GIG, that's GIG, and I think we have a few questions there. So for the sake of time, we'll hope to keep it short and quick. Looking at Germany in particular, what we should be most optimistic about, Jörg?
Oh, well, first question is, can we be optimistic?
Question from the room.
I would say it's a matter of time. The regulation has to prove that it works, that it will be successful. And I think it is very important that there is an assessment of the development in terms of the channelization rate. How many people do we expect left the German market, left the liberalized or the licensed market and went to offshore operators? And this needs to be scrutinized. But what could be most optimistic about, first of all, we've made a major step. We started regulation, we started granting licenses, and not only for sports betting, but also for the virtual slot machines and online poker. And we can say the train has left the station. And I think here's a process that cannot be stopped. And if, and we will see that later, if enforcement does good, then I think we could be optimistic about that. It's worth being compliant in this country.
I think we leave it at this with the questions. There will be a lot of other opportunities to ask questions. But let's go with some more information. Jörg, thank you again for coming and see you later.
Thank you, Willem.